Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Rob Dalton had built his life the same way he'd built his construction empire, with precision, patience, and an iron will that never bent. At 45, he commanded respect from competitors and loyalty from employees through a simple philosophy. Those who stood by him prospered, and those who crossed him learned why that was a mistake. The Dalton Construction headquarters occupied an entire city block, but Rob still remembered hammering nails as a 17-year-old dropout whose father had abandoned the family. He'd clawed his way from apprentice to foreman to contractor, eventually buying out his former boss and transforming a failing company into a multi-million-dollar operation. His marriage to Jennifer had been different, a rare moment when he'd let his guard down. She'd been 24, working as a dental hygienist, with honey blonde hair and a laugh that seemed genuine in a world full of pretense. Rob had been 30, already successful enough to provide the comfortable life she'd grown up without. "You saved me," Jennifer had whispered on their wedding night, tears glistening as she traced the scars on his knuckles from years of manual labor. 15 years later, those same hands signed million-dollar contracts and employed over 300 people. Their son Tyler, now 14, showed promise on the wrestling team, inheriting his father's determination if not his ruthless edge. Their daughter, Emma, 11, reminded Rob of Jennifer before life had hardened both of them. The family lived in a custom-built mansion on 12 acres outside the city, complete with a basement that Rob had designed as his private sanctuary, a workshop, gym, and office where he planned his business conquests. Jennifer rarely ventured down there, claiming the concrete walls felt cold and prison-like. Rob had always prided himself on reading people, but lately, Jennifer had become unreadable. She'd started working out obsessively, buying expensive clothes, and taking mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. When he questioned her, she'd laughed it off as finally taking care of myself. The first real crack in his suspicion had come 3 weeks ago when Tyler had asked, "Dad, why does Mom get so many deliveries when you're at work?" "What kind of deliveries?" "Flowers, mostly. But she always throws them away before you get home." Rob had filed that information away, the way he cataloged every detail about potential business threats. But this was his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he'd built this empire to protect and provide for. That Tuesday evening, as he reviewed blueprints for a new shopping center, Jennifer announced she'd be out with the girls again, the third time that week. "Which girls?" Rob asked without looking up from his papers. "You don't know them. College friends visiting from Denver." Rob's pen stopped moving. Jennifer had attended community college locally and maintained exactly 0 friendships from that time. She'd never mentioned anyone from Denver. "Have fun," he said simply, watching her reflection in the window as she left. She was wearing a dress he'd never seen before, and her perfume was different, heavier, more expensive. Rob had survived in construction by trusting his instincts, and every instinct screamed that his foundation was cracking. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Surface. The private investigator's office occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building Rob had renovated 5 years earlier. Charlie Morrison owed his lease renewal to Rob's generosity during the recession, a debt the former police detective seemed eager to repay. "I don't like doing this to friends," Charlie said, sliding a manila envelope across his desk. "But you need to see what you're dealing with." The photographs made Rob's jaw clench. Jennifer entering a downtown hotel. Jennifer in a restaurant, leaning across a table to kiss a man Rob recognized immediately. Derek Hoffman, the city planning commissioner who'd fast-tracked several of Rob's permit applications over the years. "How long?" Rob's voice remained steady, a skill learned from years of hiding weakness from competitors. "Best I can tell, about 8 months. Started around the time your company bid on the Riverside project." Rob studied Derek's face in the photos, all boyish charm and politician smile, 15 years younger than Rob and soft in all the places Rob was hardened by decades of physical labor. "There's more," Charlie continued. "They're not just meeting at hotels. She's been bringing him to your house. Your neighbors noticed his car there at least 6 times when you were out of town on business. The betrayal burned deeper than Rob had expected. Not just the adultery, but the calculated nature of it. Jennifer had been planning this, using his own success against him, leveraging his trust and his absences. The basement, Rob said quietly. What? She brought him to our basement. My workshop. The implications hit him like a physical blow. His sanctuary, the place where he'd built models with Tyler and helped Emma with science projects, defiled by his wife and a man he'd actually helped succeed. Charlie shifted uncomfortably. Rob, I've seen a lot of ugly divorces. Don't do anything that'll hurt your kids or put you in legal trouble. Rob stood, pocketing the envelope. I built this city, Charlie. Half the judges, most of the city council, and all the major contractors owe me favors. Derek Hoffman owes his career to my recommendations. What are you planning? Rob's smile held no warmth. I'm going to remind them both that some foundations, once cracked, can't be repaired. That night, Rob installed motion-activated cameras throughout his basement, hidden within the industrial lighting and ventilation systems he designed. If Jennifer wanted to use his sanctuary for her betrayal, he'd ensure every moment was documented. 3 days later, his phone buzzed with a security alert. The basement cameras had detected movement. Rob was 2 hours away, touring a construction site, but the live feed on his phone showed everything he needed to see. Jennifer and Derek on the leather couch where Rob had taught his children to tie their shoes, where he'd planned business strategies that employed hundreds of families. But this time, Rob didn't just watch. He activated a system he'd installed years ago for security purposes, one that could seal the basement exits remotely. The electronic locks engaged with a soft click that the camera's microphones barely picked up. Rob left the construction site immediately, driving home with the patience of a predator who knows his prey can't escape. Chapter 3. The Call. The basement had been designed as a fortress with reinforced steel doors and a ventilation system that could be controlled from Rob's phone. As he drove home, he tested each system methodically. The locks held. The lights dimmed to emergency power. The temperature began dropping as the climate control responded to his commands. By the time Rob arrived home, Derek's BMW sat in the driveway like a confession. Through his phone, he watched them realize the doors wouldn't open, saw Derek's confident facade crack as he rattled the handles and pressed the emergency buttons that Rob had quietly disabled months ago. Rob entered through the kitchen, where Tyler was doing homework at the counter. Dad? Mom's car is here, but I haven't seen her. She's in the basement with a friend. They're having an important conversation. From upstairs, Rob could hear Derek's voice growing louder, more desperate, as he called for help through the soundproofed walls. Rob had built this basement to contain power tools and construction noise. It would contain Derek's panic equally well. Rob's phone showed Jennifer trying to calm Derek, but her own composure was fracturing. They'd been trapped for 40 minutes, and the temperature had dropped to an uncomfortable 55 degrees. Tyler, Rob said calmly, take Emma to your grandmother's house. Tell her I'll pick you up tomorrow. Is everything okay? Rob's smile felt foreign on his face. Everything's perfect. After the children left, Rob descended to the basement's main door and knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the steel. Rob! Jennifer's voice was muffled but audible. The door's stuck. We can't get out. I know, Rob replied. That's the point. The silence that followed was profound. Then Derek's voice, trying to sound authoritative. Rob, this is a misunderstanding. If you'll just open the door, we can explain. Explain what? How you've been fucking my wife in my house for 8 months. How you used the influence I gave you to destroy my marriage. Rob activated the intercom system he'd installed for communicating with workers during loud projects. Their voices came through crystal clear now. Rob, please. Jennifer's voice cracked. I can explain everything. No need. I have 8 months of bank records showing your new wardrobe, restaurant charges at places we've never been together, and hotel receipts. Charlie Morrison is very thorough. Derek tried a different approach. Look, this doesn't have to ruin anyone's career. We can work something out. You're right, Rob interrupted. It doesn't have to ruin your career. It's going to end it completely. Rob pulled out his phone and made the first call to the mayor's office, where his donation history ensured immediate access. Tom, it's Rob Dalton. I need to discuss some irregularities in Derek Hoffman's permit approvals. Yes, I have documentation. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? The second call went to the president of Derek's bank, where Rob's construction loans represented their largest commercial account. Paul, I've discovered some concerning conflicts of interest involving Derek Hoffman's city position and his personal finances. I think you should know before it becomes public. Through the intercom, Rob could hear Derek pleading with Jennifer, their affair's romance evaporating under pressure. The third call was to his attorney, setting up emergency divorce proceedings that would protect his assets and ensure custody of his children. Jennifer, Rob finally said into the intercom, I want you to understand something. I built this house for our family. I designed this basement as my sanctuary. You turned it into the scene of your betrayal. So now it's where that betrayal ends. What do you mean? Derek's voice had risen to near hysteria. Rob checked his watch. It's 7 p.m. The temperature down there will hit freezing around midnight. The oxygen will last until dawn if you don't panic too much. You can't be serious, Jennifer whispered. I'm dead serious, but I'm not unreasonable. You have until midnight to decide who's more important to you, Derek or our children, because only one of you is leaving this basement alive. The screaming that followed confirmed Rob's suspicion that Derek wasn't quite the man Jennifer thought she'd fallen in love with. Rob climbed the stairs, leaving his wife and her lover to contemplate the consequences of breaking Robert Dalton's trust. Outside, he could see his neighbors' houses, families settling in for quiet evenings, unaware that the foundation of the Dalton household was finally being demolished and rebuilt to Rob's exact specifications. Chapter 4. The game begins. At 9 p.m., Rob received an unexpected visitor. Tyler stood on the front porch, having somehow convinced his grandmother to drive him back. Dad, there's something weird going on. Emma's crying and won't tell Grandma why. And Mom's phone keeps going to voicemail. Rob's calculation shifted instantly. His children's well-being superseded even his revenge, a hierarchy Derek and Jennifer had foolishly ignored when they chose his home as their playground. Come inside, son. We need to talk. Rob led Tyler to the living room, away from the basement door. Through his phone's monitoring app, he could see Derek pacing frantically while Jennifer sat curled in a corner, finally understanding the depth of her mistake. Your mother made some bad choices, Rob began carefully. She's been lying to us about where she goes, and she's been bringing someone to our house who doesn't belong here. Tyler's face darkened with premature understanding. The guy with the BMW? I saw him here last week when you were in Portland. Rob felt a flash of pride at his son's observational skills, followed by anger that Jennifer had exposed their children to her deception. That's right. His name is Derek Hoffman. He works for the city, and he's been taking advantage of your mother's confusion. Are you getting divorced? The direct question deserved an honest answer. Yes. Your mother broke promises that can't be fixed, but you and Emma will always be my priority. Tyler nodded with the gravity of someone forced to mature too quickly. What happens now? Rob checked his phone. The basement temperature had dropped to 48 degrees. Derek was trying to break down the door with a wrench from Rob's tool cabinet, achieving nothing but exhaustion against reinforced steel. Now, your mother and Derek learn about consequences. But first, you're going to call Emma and tell her everything will be okay. Then you're going back to Grandma's house. I want to stay with you. Rob's heart ached at the loyalty, but his son couldn't witness what came next. I know you do, but tonight, I need to finish something that started before you were born, when I decided what kind of man I was going to be. At 10 p.m., Rob made his final offer through the intercom. Jennifer, I'm giving you 30 minutes to make a choice. You can try to save Derek, or you can think about Tyler and Emma's future. But understand this. Whoever I pull out of that basement alive will be the only one who survives what's coming next. Derek's voice exploded through the speaker. You're insane. When this gets out, you'll be in prison for kidnapping for attempted murder. No, Rob interrupted calmly. When this gets out, I'll be a grieving widower whose wife and her lover died in a tragic accident during their secret affair. My basement security system will show how they went down there together and got trapped when the old electronic locks malfunctioned during a power surge. Rob flipped the main electrical breaker, plunging the house into darkness before switching to backup power that excluded the basement. To any investigation, it would look like a system failure had caused the locks to engage automatically. The security cameras will show me arriving home to find their bodies, calling 911 immediately and desperately trying to break down the door. Very tragic. Very unfortunate. Jennifer's voice came through broken and desperate. Rob, please. I know I hurt you, but Tyler and Emma need their mother. Tyler and Emma need a mother who respects their family enough not to destroy it. You stopped being that person 8 months ago. Rob had spent years studying his wife, learning her patterns and weaknesses the same way he analyzed business competitors. Jennifer was selfish, but not evil, vain, but not heartless. Derek represented everything she thought she wanted: youth, excitement, freedom from responsibility. But when faced with actual consequences, Rob knew which choice she'd make. Derek, meanwhile, was a political creature who'd built his career on charm and connections rather than substance. Under pressure, his true nature was emerging: cowardly, entitled, and willing to sacrifice anyone for his own survival. At 10:25 p.m., Jennifer's voice came through the intercom with the flat tone of surrender. Rob, I choose my children. I choose Tyler and Emma. Derek's screaming protest was cut short by the sound of Jennifer hitting him with something heavy, probably the metal toolbox Rob kept by his workbench. Rob smiled. His wife was many things, but she'd never been weak. Chapter 5. Reconstruction. Rob waited until Derek's voice stopped coming through the intercom before engaging the basement's emergency release. The steel door opened with a hydraulic whisper, revealing Jennifer standing over Derek's unconscious form, her face streaked with tears and determination. Is he dead? Rob asked clinically. No, but he will be if you want him to be. Rob studied his wife in the emergency lighting, blonde hair disheveled, expensive dress torn, manicured hands bloodied from gripping the toolbox she'd used as a weapon. This was the woman he'd married before comfort and complacency had dulled her survival instincts. I don't want him dead, Rob said finally. Dead men can't suffer properly. Rob descended into his sanctuary, now reclaimed through violence and choice. Derek was breathing but unconscious, a gash across his forehead where Jennifer had struck him. Help me get him upstairs. Together, they carried Derek to the living room, Rob noting how Jennifer moved with purpose now, the affair's romantic delusion replaced by practical necessity. Rob, I need you to know. No explanations. Rob cut her off. Explanations are for people who made mistakes. You made choices. 8 months of calculated choices. Derek groaned back to consciousness as Rob zip-tied his hands behind his back, a skill learned from years of securing construction materials. What happens to him? Jennifer asked. Derek's going to help me send a message about the cost of betraying trust. Rob had spent the last 3 hours making calls, and the trap was already springing shut around Derek's life. By morning, his bank would freeze his accounts pending an investigation into irregularities in city permit approvals. His political allies would distance themselves from the scandal Rob's documentation had already put in motion. But that was just the beginning. Derek's eyes focused on Rob with the desperate clarity of a cornered animal. You can't do this. I have rights. You had rights, Rob corrected. You also had a wife, a career, and a future. All things you gambled away when you decided to fuck my wife in my house. Rob pulled out his phone and showed Derek a photo. Derek's wife Linda at their suburban home, unaware that her husband's affair was about to destroy everything she'd built her life around. Linda's going to receive some interesting photographs tomorrow, along with bank records showing how you've been spending city money on hotel rooms and gifts for your mistress. Derek's face went white. Linda doesn't deserve this. Neither did my children, Rob replied. But you made your choice when you involved our families in your selfishness. Jennifer watched this exchange with growing understanding. She thought her affair was about love and excitement, but Rob was showing her the brutal mathematics of betrayal, how every action created consequences that spread like cracks through multiple foundations. "What do you want from me?" Derek whispered. Rob's smile was sharp as construction steel. "I want you to disappear. Tonight. Forever. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever contact my wife or approach my children, I'll finish what Jennifer started in that basement." "And go where?" "Do what?" "You're destroying my entire life. I'm giving you the chance to start over somewhere else, which is more mercy than you showed my family. Take it." Rob cut Derek's zip ties and watched him stumble toward the door. His political confidence shattered along with his skull. Derek would leave town, Rob knew. Men like him always ran when confronted with real consequences. As Derek's BMW disappeared down the driveway, Jennifer finally spoke. "What happens to us?" Rob looked at his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who'd shared his bed for 15 years and then shared his sanctuary with another man. "We rebuild," he said simply, "but on my terms this time." Chapter 6. New Foundations. The divorce papers Jennifer signed were more comprehensive than a construction contract and equally unforgiving. Rob's attorney had crafted them during the long night, ensuring that Jennifer's affair would cost her everything except minimal custody rights. Rights she'd retain only as long as she adhered to Rob's conditions. Supervised visits only for the first year, Rob explained as Jennifer read through the settlement. All contact with Tyler and Emma monitored. No overnight stays until they're 18 and can choose for themselves. Jennifer's hand trembled as she turned the pages. The financial terms were devastating but not vindictive. She'd receive enough support to live modestly, but the mansion, the investments, and the children would remain with Rob. "This is the best deal you're going to get," Rob continued, "because it's based on me believing you chose our children over Derek. If I find out you've contacted him, if I discover you're planning to continue this relationship anywhere—" "I'm not," Jennifer interrupted quickly. "Rob, I swear whatever we had is over." Rob studied her face with the same intensity he brought to reading architectural blueprints. The woman sitting across from him was hollow-eyed and diminished. Her suburban princess fantasy collapsed under the weight of real consequences. "Good. Because Derek's political career ended this morning when the mayor received my documentation of his permit irregularities. His wife filed for divorce after receiving those photographs Charlie took. His bank froze his accounts. And I made sure word reached his new girlfriend's husband. Apparently Derek's been quite busy." Jennifer's eyes widened. "How many others?" "3 that we found. Turns out your city commissioner has a pattern of using his position to seduce married women with construction permits or zoning appeals. You weren't special, Jennifer. You were just convenient." The devastation in Jennifer's expression might have moved Rob once, but that capacity for mercy had been cauterized in the basement when she'd chosen their children over her lover. Tyler and Emma returned from their grandmother's house that afternoon to find their mother packing suitcases and their father making dinner with unusual attention to detail. "Are you leaving, Mom?" Emma asked with 11-year-old directness. Jennifer knelt to her daughter's eye level. "For a while, sweetheart. Mommy made some mistakes that hurt Daddy and our family. I need to go away and think about how to fix them." Tyler, more perceptive at 14, watched his father's reaction. Rob's face remained impassive, but Tyler caught the slight nod. Approval for Jennifer's honesty, rare enough to be noteworthy. "Will you visit us?" Emma's voice was small. "Every weekend," Jennifer promised, glancing at Rob for confirmation. He nodded again. The custody arrangement would allow that much. After Jennifer left for her new apartment across town, Rob sat with his children at the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals as a family. "Is this our fault?" Emma asked. "Did we do something wrong?" Rob's chest tightened. His daughter's guilt was the one consequence he hadn't calculated, the crack in his own foundation he hadn't anticipated. "No, baby girl. This is about choices adults made. Your mother chose to break promises she made to me, and I chose not to accept that. Those were our decisions, not yours." Tyler, wrestling with his own understanding, asked, "Dad, are you going to be okay?" Rob looked at his son, almost as tall as Rob now, with the same stubborn jaw and direct gaze that had carried Rob through decades of challenges. "I'm going to be better than okay. We're going to be better than okay." because we're going to rebuild our family the right way this time, with trust, honesty, and respect for each other. That night, after the children were asleep, Rob returned to his basement sanctuary. The leather couch where Jennifer and Derek had betrayed his trust sat empty, but it no longer felt contaminated. It was just furniture now, in a space that belonged to him and his children. Rob opened his phone and reviewed the construction plans for a new project, a community center that would employ dozens of workers and serve hundreds of families. Building had always been his answer to destruction, creation his response to loss. He'd torn down a marriage, exposed a corrupt official, and restructured his family according to his specifications. The foundation was solid now, built on consequences rather than compromises. Rob Dalton had always been a man who built things to last. Now he was going to build a future where betrayal carried a price too high for anyone to pay. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Rob's reconstruction was nearly complete. Tyler had grown 3 inches and joined the varsity wrestling team, channeling his anger into the sport his father understood. Emma had stopped asking when Mommy was coming home permanently and started helping Rob plan their weekend activities. Jennifer's supervised visits had become routine, Saturday afternoons at neutral locations, conversations that stayed carefully surface level, a relationship rebuilt around the children's needs rather than adult complications. But Derek Hoffman had made a critical error. Instead of disappearing as Rob had ordered, he'd remained in the city, taking a job with a competing construction firm and rebuilding his life on the assumption that Rob's revenge was complete. Charlie Morrison's call came on a Tuesday morning. "Rob, you need to see this." The photographs showed Derek meeting with Vincent Torres, owner of Torres Construction, Rob's primary competitor for city contracts. The images captured handshakes, document exchanges, and what appeared to be very friendly negotiations. "They're planning something," Charlie explained. "Derek's been feeding Torres information about your bid processes, your client relationships, everything he learned during his time with the Planning Commission." Rob studied the photos with the cold analysis that had built his empire. Derek had violated the fundamental rule of defeated enemies. He tried to rebuild by attacking rather than retreating. "There's more," Charlie continued. "Derek's been telling people around town that you kidnapped him, that you threatened his life. He's building a case that you're mentally unstable and dangerous to work with." Rob smiled, recognizing the pattern. Derek was attempting to use Rob's own reputation for ruthlessness against him, turning strength into weakness through clever narrative construction. "Has Torres filed any formal complaints? Gone to the police?" "No. Derek's smart enough to know he can't prove anything, and Torres doesn't want to risk your political connections. But they're definitely planning to damage your business reputation." Rob made 2 phone calls. The first was to his attorney, requesting documentation of every city contract Derek had influenced during his affair with Jennifer. The second was to Vincent Torres directly. "Vincent, it's Rob Dalton. I think we should meet. I have some information about Derek Hoffman that affects both our businesses." The meeting took place at Rob's office, in the conference room, where he negotiated $100 million projects. Vincent Torres arrived with Derek in tow, clearly expecting some kind of showdown. Rob had prepared differently. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Vincent, I assume Derek has told you about our personal difficulties?" Torres nodded cautiously. "He mentioned some problems with your wife. Did he mention that during his affair with Jennifer, he used his position on the Planning Commission to fast-track my permit applications in exchange for her companionship?" The question hung in the air like construction dust. Derek's face went pale as Rob continued. "Did he explain that every project approval he influenced while sleeping with my wife constitutes corruption of public office? Or that the FBI is very interested in his pattern of trading permits for sexual favors with multiple married women?" Rob slid a folder across the table, not to Derek but to Torres. "Vincent, you've built a respectable business over 20 years. Are you sure you want to associate with someone whose very presence makes every contract he touches legally questionable?" Torres opened the folder, his expression growing darker as he read. Rob had documented everything. Derek's permit approvals, the timeline of his affair with Jennifer, the pattern of corruption that extended far beyond one relationship. This is all circumstantial, Derek protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, it's not, Rob replied calmly. Because Jennifer has agreed to testify about every conversation where you discussed manipulating city processes. Every time you bragged about your influence. Every promise you made to smooth the way for projects in exchange for continued access to my wife. Derek's political instincts finally recognized the trap. Rob hadn't just documented the affair. He created a legal framework that made Derek's very existence a liability to anyone who worked with him. You're bluffing, Derek said desperately. Jennifer would never. Jennifer will do whatever protects her children's future, Rob interrupted. And her children's future depends on their father maintaining his business and reputation. You're not just my enemy, Derek. You're a threat to Tyler and Emma's inheritance. Vincent Torres closed the folder and looked at Derek with the expression of a man cutting loose dead weight. Derek, I think our business relationship is concluded. Derek left the building alone, his brief comeback shattered by the same miscalculation that had cost him everything the first time, underestimating Robert Dalton's capacity for patient, thorough destruction. Chapter 8. The Final Blow. Derek's desperation made him dangerous in ways Rob hadn't anticipated. Cut off from legitimate employment and facing potential federal corruption charges, Derek began stalking Jennifer during her custody visits, appearing at the restaurants and parks where she met with Tyler and Emma. Emma noticed first, pointing out the man who keeps watching us during a Saturday afternoon at the zoo. Tyler, now 15 and protective of his sister, was ready to confront Derek directly. No, Rob said firmly when Tyler suggested action. Derek is trying to provoke us into doing something stupid. We're going to be smarter than that. But Derek's harassment escalated. He followed Jennifer home from her custody visits, left threatening messages on her apartment voicemail, and began spreading rumors that Rob had threatened to kill him. All carefully crafted to build a case for police intervention without admitting his own criminal behavior. The breaking point came when Derek approached Emma directly outside her school, claiming to be a friend of Mommy's who needed to talk to her about her father. Emma, trained by Rob's careful lessons about strangers, ran to the school office instead of listening. But the incident crossed every line Rob had established for protecting his children. That evening, Rob made a different kind of call, not to lawyers or investigators, but to Mickey Torino, a foreman who'd worked for Rob for 15 years and whose loyalty ran deeper than professional obligation. Mickey, remember when that subcontractor tried to steal copper from the Riverside site? Sure. You had me and the boys convince him to find work in another state. I need that kind of convincing again. But this time it's personal. Mickey asked no questions. Men who'd worked construction for decades understood the difference between business disputes and threats to family. The conversation took place in Derek's apartment parking lot at 2 a.m., with Derek awakened by a knock on his door that he was wise enough not to ignore. Mickey and two other foremen, all built like the heavy machinery they operated, delivered Rob's final message with the clarity that only comes from absolute certainty. Mr. Dalton wants you to understand that your next choice is permanent, Mickey explained in the tone he used for safety briefings. You can leave this city tonight and never come back, or you can stay and see what happens when you threaten his children. Derek, understanding that he'd finally pushed beyond the realm of legal consequences into something more primitive and final, made the smart choice. His apartment was empty by dawn, his car gone, his forwarding address non-existent. Rob received confirmation through Charlie Morrison that Derek had withdrawn his savings and disappeared, this time apparently understanding that some men's patience had limits that couldn't be tested twice. Jennifer called that afternoon, her voice shaky with relief. He's gone. Derek's gone. I know. Rob, what did you do? I protected our children, Rob replied simply. Something I should have done more thoroughly the first time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything that had been destroyed and rebuilt. Thank you, Jennifer finally whispered. Rob felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Derek's removal was simply maintenance, like repairing a foundation crack before it could spread. This ends it, Jennifer. Derek, the affair, the consequences, all of it. We move forward now, for Tyler and Emma. I understand. Rob believed she did. His wife had learned the true cost of betrayal, not just to herself, but to everyone connected to her choices. She'd pay that price for the rest of her life, in limited custody and supervised visits, and the knowledge that her children's father was a man who never forgot and never forgave completely. But she'd also learned that Robert Dalton protected what belonged to him with a precision and commitment that few people could match or challenge. Chapter 9. Solid Ground. 2 years after Derek's disappearance, the Dalton family had found its new equilibrium. Tyler, now 17 and captain of the wrestling team, had grown into a young man who understood that strength came with responsibility. Emma, 13 and showing signs of her father's analytical mind, excelled in math and science while maintaining the emotional intelligence her mother had possessed before corruption set in. Jennifer's custody visits had evolved from supervised encounters to genuine relationships with her children, though she lived in permanent exile from the family she'd helped destroy. She worked as a dental hygienist again, supporting herself modestly while rebuilding trust one careful weekend at a time. Rob had expanded Dalton Construction into 3 states, employing over 800 people and earning recognition as a leader in sustainable building practices. The community center he'd built after the divorce served as headquarters for youth programs that kept kids like Tyler and Emma engaged in positive activities. The basement that had once been violated by betrayal now housed Tyler's weight training equipment and Emma's science experiments. Rob had never spoken to his children about what had happened in that space during the affair, but Tyler seemed to understand why his father occasionally stared at the walls with the expression of a man remembering battles fought and won. Derek Hoffman's name had faded from city memory, his brief political career reduced to a cautionary tale about corruption and the consequences of overreaching. Rob occasionally wondered if Derek had managed to rebuild somewhere else, but the wondering was academic. Derek was no longer his problem. The mail arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Rob recognized Jennifer's handwriting immediately. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with 3 words, "I am sorry." Rob studied the note, remembering the woman who'd written it. Young, beautiful, laughing in the kitchen of their first apartment while he planned the empire that would eventually protect and provide for their children. He filed the letter in his desk drawer, not because forgiveness was possible, but because some communications required acknowledgement even when they changed nothing. Tyler found him there an hour later, reviewing blueprints for a new housing development that would employ dozens of families. "Dad, I got accepted to state engineering program." Rob looked up at his son, tall, confident, carrying himself with the quiet strength that came from watching his father rebuild their world through will and precision. "Full scholarship, academic, and wrestling. Coach says I've got potential for nationals if I keep working." Rob nodded, pride mixing with satisfaction. Tyler would build his own empire someday, but he'd do it with the foundation Rob had provided. The understanding that trust was earned, betrayal was punished, and family was protected at any cost. What about Emma's science fair project? First place, regional competition. She's going to states with that water purification system you helped her design. Rob smiled, thinking of his daughter's brilliance applied to solving real problems rather than creating them. Emma would change the world through innovation rather than construction, but she'd carry the same principles: precision, patience, and the knowledge that some people could be trusted and others could only be contained. That evening, as Rob tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question he'd been expecting for months. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come home for good?" Rob considered his answer carefully, weighing honesty against hope. "No, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean our family is broken. It just means we rebuilt it stronger." Emma nodded with the acceptance of a child who'd learned that strength sometimes required difficult choices. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl." Rob turned off her bedroom light and walked to his study, where the blueprints for tomorrow's projects waited on his desk. Through the window, he could see the lights of the city he'd helped build, the neighborhoods where his employees lived, the schools and hospitals and community centers that bore his company's signature. Robert Dalton had learned long ago that some foundations, once cracked, could never be repaired, only demolished and rebuilt according to better specifications. He'd applied that knowledge to his marriage, his business, and his family with the same precision he brought to construction projects. The results were solid, functional, and built to last. Outside, the city hummed with the quiet activity of people living their lives on foundations they trusted to hold. Rob had made sure those foundations were worthy of that trust, just as he'd made sure his children understood the difference between building and destroying, between strength and weakness, between loyalty and betrayal. Derek Hoffman was gone. Jennifer lived with the consequences of her choices. Tyler and Emma were growing into adults who understood the value of character and the cost of its absence. Robert Dalton's work was complete, his foundation secure, his legacy established in steel and stone, and the uncompromising principles that had carried him from a 17-year-old dropout to a man who owned half a city and commanded respect from the other half. Some men built buildings. Rob Dalton had built something more lasting, a definition of consequences that would echo through every relationship his children formed, every choice they made, every foundation they laid for their own futures. In a world full of compromise and second chances, Robert Dalton had created something rare, absolute accountability. And in doing so, he'd ensured that the Dalton name would be associated with strength, precision, and the unforgiving mathematics of trust for generations to come. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Golden Promises. Bryce Harmon stood at the edge of the construction site, surveying what would soon become Axiom Tower, the jewel of Lakeshire's skyline. At 32, he'd built Harmon Construction from nothing into one of the region's most respected firms. The evening sun glinted off his engagement ring as he checked his watch. He was meeting Vanessa at Bellamy's in an hour to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. "Looking good, boss," called Miles Dennison, his foreman and oldest friend since their foster care days. "We're ahead of schedule." "Not good enough," Bryce replied with a half-smile. "I promised Axiom we'd be done 2 weeks early." Miles shook his head. "Always pushing." "How's Vanessa handling the wedding preparations?" "She's in her element. Guest list is up to 300 now." Bryce ran his hand through his dark hair. "Her father finally warmed up to me. I think proving I could match their family fortune helped." The truth was more complicated. Douglas Reynolds, shipping magnate and Lakeshire's old money elite, had made no secret of his disdain for Bryce. A self-made man with questionable origins wasn't his idea of a suitable match for his daughter. But Vanessa had chosen Bryce, captivated by his rugged charm and relentless ambition. Their romance had been a whirlwind. Vanessa Reynolds, socialite, philanthropist, and the city's most eligible bachelorette, had literally crashed into his life when her Tesla collided with his truck at a stoplight. What began as an angry exchange of insurance information ended with dinner at Lakeshire's most exclusive restaurant. 6 months later, he proposed with a flawless 5-carat diamond. "Still can't believe you tamed Lakeshire's princess," Miles teased. "Though that crowd she runs with, especially that Wexler guy, they still look at you like you're the help." Bryce's jaw tightened. "Tristan Wexler is her childhood friend. Nothing more." "If you say so." Miles changed the subject. "How's the beach house coming?" "Finishing touches. It's Vanessa's wedding gift." Bryce hadn't told his fiancée about the oceanfront property he'd purchased and renovated. It represented everything: his success, their future, the family they would build together. As Bryce left the construction site, his phone chimed with a text from Vanessa, running late. "Charity meeting with Tristan. Meet at 8 instead. Love you." Bryce ignored the familiar twinge of unease and replied with a simple "see you then." Their wedding was 3 weeks away. Nothing could possibly go wrong now. Chapter 2, Shattered Reflection. Pain. Blinding, all-consuming pain. Bryce's consciousness flickered between darkness and harsh fluorescent lights. Frantic voices echoed around him. Multiple fractures, severe facial lacerations, third-degree burns. The helicopter crash replayed in fragments. The client meeting at the mountain resort. The unexpected snowstorm. The pilot's strained voice announcing mechanical failure. The violent impact as they hit the mountainside. The searing heat of flames against his skin as he dragged the unconscious pilot from the wreckage before collapsing. 3 days later, Bryce awoke in the burn unit. Miles was there, his expression telling Bryce everything before the doctors explained. The right side of his face and body had sustained severe burns and lacerations. He'd undergone the first of what would be many reconstructive surgeries, but the doctors were clear. The scarring would be permanent and significant. "Vanessa?" Bryce asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She's been here," Miles answered, not meeting his eyes. She needed some air." When Vanessa finally visited, her reaction was worse than anything Bryce could have imagined. She flinched visibly at the sight of him, her perfect features contorting into poorly disguised repulsion. "They say you were heroic," she said, maintaining distance from his bed. "Saving the pilot like that. Where have you been?" Bryce asked, noticing the absence of her engagement ring. Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been trying, Bryce, but I can't. I just can't do this." "Do what?" His heart raced despite the medication. "The doctors showed me simulations of what you'll look like after all the surgeries. You'll still be disfigured." She looked away. "I can't walk down the aisle to, this isn't what I signed up for." The words hit harder than the helicopter crash. "Vanessa, it's still me." She finally met his gaze, her blue eyes cold. "You're too ugly for me now, Bryce." She placed the engagement ring on his bedside table. "We both know appearances matter in my world. No one will want you looking like this." As she turned to leave, Bryce glimpsed Tristan Wexler waiting in the hallway, his hand reaching for Vanessa's as soon as she exited. Through the haze of pain medication, something crystallized in Bryce's mind. This wasn't just about his scars. This betrayal had been brewing long before the crash. Chapter 3. Ashes and Embers. The next 18 months nearly destroyed Bryce. The physical pain of multiple surgeries paled compared to watching his life unravel. Harmon Construction hemorrhaged clients after his extended absence. The banks circled like vultures as projects fell behind. His life savings evaporated into medical bills not covered by insurance. The final blow came when Axiom Tower, his pride and joy, was reassigned to Wexler Development. That night, Miles found Bryce in his apartment, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and newspaper clippings announcing Vanessa and Tristan's engagement. "You look like shit," Miles said bluntly, opening the curtains to let in sunlight for what seemed like the first time in months. "Did you know she was sleeping with him while we were engaged?" Bryce asked, his voice hollow. "I suspected." Miles sat across from him. "Everyone in Lakeshire is talking about their fairy tale romance. How they were always meant to be together." Bryce laughed bitterly. "They're calling it a blessing in disguise that the accident revealed her true feelings before we married." "Accident?" Miles frowned. "The helicopter crash. Mechanical failure," they said. Bryce pushed forward a folder he'd obtained from a private investigator. Except it wasn't. Someone tampered with the fuel line. Miles flipped through the photos, his expression darkening. "You think Wexler arranged it? I think he wanted me out of the way." Dead would have been convenient. Disfigured was an acceptable alternative. Bryce stood, steadier than he'd been in months. "The crash was meant to eliminate me. Instead, it revealed who my enemies are." That night, after Miles left, Bryce stood before the mirror, truly examining his scars for the first time. The right side of his face was a landscape of ridged tissue and grafted skin. His once handsome features were now a stark contrast of before and after. "No one will want you," Vanessa's words echoed. Bryce's fist crashed into the mirror, shattering his reflection into 1,000 pieces. As blood dripped from his knuckles, something awakened within him, a cold, calculated resolve. He would rebuild himself, his body, his fortune, his power, and when he had everything, he would take from them what they valued most. Not with the quick vengeance of a wounded animal, but with the patient, methodical destruction of a predator who knows exactly when to strike. Chapter 4. Phoenix Strategy. 3 years after the crash, Bryce Harmon had vanished from Lakeshire's social consciousness. In his place emerged B.R. Harmon, founder of Phoenix Ventures, a shadowy investment firm operating from Seattle. Few connected the reclusive financier to the failed construction company owner. Bryce preferred it that way. The extensive reconstructive surgeries had restored functionality, but left him with a distinctive appearance. He'd grown a precisely trimmed beard to cover the worst scars and adopted custom-tailored suits that exuded power and commanded respect. His transformation began with Vivian Mercer, a venture capitalist who'd seen something in Bryce when she visited him in physical therapy. "You've got the hunger," she'd said. "The kind that comes only after you've lost everything." Under Vivian's mentorship, Bryce leveraged his intimate knowledge of construction and real estate, combined with an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. Phoenix Ventures specialized in rescuing failing projects, turning them profitable with ruthless efficiency. Miles remained his only connection to his former life, now serving as Phoenix's chief operating officer. Together, they built an empire in the shadows, with one purpose driving every acquisition: positioning Bryce to return to Lakeshire at the perfect moment. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding announcement is everywhere. Miles mentioned during their weekly strategy meeting, sliding a society page across the desk. Bryce glanced at the photo of Vanessa in Tristan's arms, her smile radiant as she showed off her enormous diamond ring. 4 years of engagement. Interesting, they're only now setting a date. Wexler Development is struggling, Miles explained. The Axiom Tower is behind schedule and over budget. Word is Douglas Reynolds finally issued an ultimatum: finish the tower and marry his daughter, or lose both. Bryce leaned back in his chair, satisfaction curling his lips. What's the status of Horizon Partners? They're desperate. The pandemic crushed their liquidity. They'll accept our offer. Horizon Partners owned 30% of Wexler Development's debt that would soon belong to Phoenix Ventures. And the other matter? Miles handed him another folder. Found him. The helicopter mechanic. He left the country after the crash, but he's back now. Inside was surveillance footage of a man drinking alone in a dive bar. Antonio Diaz, the maintenance worker who'd been paid to sabotage Bryce's helicopter. Arrange a meeting, Bryce said quietly. It's time he told us who hired him. 3 nights later, a terrified Diaz confirmed what Bryce had suspected. Tristan Wexler had paid him $50,000 to ensure the helicopter would experience catastrophic mechanical failure. What Wexler hadn't counted on was Bryce's determination to survive. With Diaz's signed confession secured, Bryce made his final preparations. Phoenix Ventures acquired the small but respected Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, and Bryce selected the perfect property to serve as both his residence and the new Phoenix headquarters, a towering penthouse overlooking Axiom Tower. Are you sure about this timeline? Miles asked as they finalized the details. Once we make these moves, there's no turning back. Bryce stared out at the Seattle skyline one last time. I've waited 4 years. It's time Lakeshire remember my name. Chapter 5. Calculated Ascension. Bryce's return to Lakeshire was meticulously orchestrated. Phoenix Ventures announced its relocation with the purchase of the Hammond Building, a historic landmark directly across from Axiom Tower. The local business community buzzed with speculation about the mysterious B.R. Harmon, who had amassed a fortune seemingly overnight. Vivian Mercer arranged Bryce's first public appearance at the annual Chamber of Commerce Gala, an event certain to include the Reynolds and Wexler families. Remember, Vivian cautioned as they entered the ballroom, your goal tonight isn't revenge. It's establishing dominance. The room quieted as they entered. Bryce, now 37, carried himself with the magnetic confidence of a predator. The scars visible above his beard only added to his mystique. His custom Brioni suit and the intensity of his gaze drew attention from everyone, particularly Vanessa Reynolds. She stood across the room beside Tristan, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as recognition slowly dawned. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Looks like your ex-fiancée remembers you, Vivian murmured. She's not important tonight, Bryce replied, though he noted with satisfaction how Vanessa whispered urgently to Tristan, whose face drained of color. Douglas Reynolds approached first, business instincts overriding social awkwardness. "Mr. Harmon, we're honored to have Phoenix Ventures in Lakeshire. I don't believe we've formally met." "Actually, we have," Bryce replied, his voice deeper and more commanding than in his previous life. "I was once engaged to your daughter." Reynolds paled. "Bryce? We thought you'd left Lakeshire." "I did. Now I'm back." Bryce scanned the room, noting the whispers spreading like wildfire. Phoenix Ventures has significant plans for this city. Throughout the evening, Bryce navigated the social battlefield with precision. He announced Phoenix's first Lakeshire project, a $300 million development that would employ local workers, specifically those laid off when Wexler Development downsized. He watched Tristan see from across the room, unable to confront the man who was simultaneously his greatest nightmare and his potential financial savior. Horizon Partners had made it known that Phoenix now held significant leverage over Wexler Development. The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle's front page featured Bryce's photograph under the headline, "Phoenix Rises, Mysterious Billionaire Returns to Transform Lakeshire." Within weeks, Bryce had systematically infiltrated every aspect of Lakeshire's business community. He donated $20 million to the hospital that had treated his burns, establishing the Harmon Center for Reconstructive Surgery. He purchased the land surrounding Wexler's flagship development, effectively controlling access to utilities and transportation. When Axiom Corporation expressed concerns about Wexler Development's delays, Bryce was there with solutions and alternatives. His revenge wasn't just personal, it was comprehensive. "Vanessa's been asking about you," Miles reported during their daily briefing. "She's reached out to mutual acquaintances, trying to arrange an accidental meeting." Bryce smiled coldly. "Make sure she gets nowhere near me. And Wexler, he'll come to us soon enough. He has no choice." Bryce examined the latest financial reports. "How are we positioned for the market correction?" "Perfectly. When it hits, we'll be able to acquire everything on our list, including controlling interest in Reynolds Shipping." The economic downturn struck 2 months later, precisely when Bryce had predicted. As businesses throughout Lakeshire struggled, Phoenix Ventures thrived, strategically acquiring competitors and suppliers until Bryce controlled a business ecosystem that quietly strangled Wexler Development's operations. The Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, now firmly under Bryce's editorial direction, ran a cover story featuring his full-page photograph, "Visionary Leader: How B.R. Harmon Became Lakeshire's First Billionaire." That evening, Bryce's phone registered the first of what would become hundreds of calls for Vanessa Reynolds. He let it ring unanswered. Chapter 6: Perfect Positioning. The market correction Bryce engineered devastated Wexler Development. Tristan's company, already struggling with the over-budget Axiom Tower, now faced bankruptcy. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding was postponed indefinitely as Tristan scrambled to save his family's legacy. Bryce watched from his penthouse as workers removed the Wexler Development logo from the Axiom Tower construction site. Phoenix Ventures had acquired the project through a web of shell companies, ensuring neither Tristan nor Douglas Reynolds knew who had delivered the killing blow. "Wexler's requesting a meeting," Miles announced, entering Bryce's office with a satisfied grin. "Says he has a proposal that could benefit both parties." "Schedule it for Friday," Bryce replied. "Let him stew a few more days." "And Vanessa?" "That's her 218th voicemail since the magazine cover." Miles held up Bryce's phone with its notification of missed calls. "Have you analyzed the messages?" "As you requested. First 20 were shock and questions. Next 50 were reminiscing about good times. After that, increasingly desperate appeals about how she never stopped loving you and made a terrible mistake." Miles grimaced. "Latest ones suggest she's willing to leave Wexler if you'll just speak with her." Bryce's expression remained impassive. "Keep monitoring. Don't respond." His revenge required perfect timing. Every day Vanessa's calls went unanswered increased her desperation. Every hour Tristan waited for a meeting diminished his leverage. Meanwhile, Bryce continued his public ascension. He established the Phoenix Foundation, focusing on burn survivors and children from foster care. His carefully cultivated public image was that of a scarred yet compassionate titan of industry, a man who had overcome personal tragedy to build an empire. Few connected these philanthropic efforts with systematic destruction of the Reynolds-Wexler business interests. By the time Douglas Reynolds realized his shipping company was being strangled by Phoenix-controlled ports and logistics companies, it was too late. On Thursday night, one day before Tristan's scheduled meeting, Bryce attended the governor's ball alone. He had declined all romantic entanglements during his rise to power, focusing solely on his mission. This single-mindedness created an aura of mystery that only enhanced his appeal. As expected, Vanessa was there, radiant in a designer gown, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Throughout the evening, she maneuvered closer to Bryce, finally intercepting him near the terrace doors. "Bryce," she breathed, touching his arm lightly. "Please, I've been trying to reach you." He regarded her with detached interest, as one might observe an insect. "Ms. Reynolds, how unexpected. I've called you hundreds of times." Her blue eyes searched his face, lingering on his scars with fascination rather than revulsion now. "We need to talk." "Do we? What happened between us?" "I was wrong. Terribly wrong." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've regretted it every day." Bryce glanced meaningfully at her engagement ring. "Your fiancé might disagree. Tristan and I, it's complicated. It was never what I truly wanted." She stepped closer, her perfume enveloping him. "You've changed. Become something extraordinary." "Yes," Bryce agreed coldly. "I have. Perhaps we could start again." Her hand rested on his chest, an intimate gesture captured by several nearby photographers. "Dinner tomorrow night?" For a moment, Bryce allowed himself to remember how deeply he had once loved this woman, how completely her betrayal had shattered him. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full," he said finally. "I have a meeting with Mr. Wexler tomorrow that may run late." Vanessa paled. "With Tristan?" "What?" "Business," Bryce replied vaguely. "Though I understand congratulations are in order. The wedding is back on." "No. I mean technically, but she composed herself." "Bryce, whatever Tristan wants from you, I should warn you." "Ms. Reynolds," Bryce interrupted, "you had your opportunity to warn me 5 years ago, when I was in a hospital bed, and you decided I was too disfigured to love." He stepped away from her touch. "You've made 218 attempts to contact me. I've ignored everyone. That should tell you everything you need to know about my interest in rekindling any relationship with you." As he walked away, Bryce finally felt a measure of the satisfaction he'd been working toward. But it was merely an appetizer. The main course would be served tomorrow, when Tristan Wexler walked into his office, not knowing he was meeting with the man whose life he had tried to destroy. Chapter 7. Mask Removed. Tristan Wexler arrived at Phoenix Ventures precisely at 2 p.m., escorted by Miles to the executive conference room rather than Bryce's office. The subtle power move wasn't lost on Tristan, whose once impeccable appearance now showed signs of strain. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Mr. Harmon will join you shortly," Miles informed him, offering no refreshments. Bryce watched through the one-way glass, savoring the moment. He'd waited 5 years for this confrontation, meticulously constructing every detail. When he finally entered, Tristan rose quickly, extending his hand. "Mr. Harmon, thank you for seeing me. Your reputation precedes you." Bryce ignored the outstretched hand. "Does it? Which reputation would that be, Mr. Wexler?" Confusion flickered across Tristan's features. "Your business acumen, of course. Phoenix Ventures has made remarkable inroads in Lakeshire." "Interesting." Bryce circled the table slowly. "I wonder what else you know about me." "Only what everyone knows. You're something of a mystery man." Tristan attempted a collegial smile. "Though I understand you may have previously lived in Lakeshire." "I did." Bryce sat at the head of the table. "In fact, Mr. Wexler, we've met before." "Have we? I don't recall." 5 years ago, you were visiting Vanessa Reynolds at Lakeshire Memorial Hospital. She had just returned my engagement ring." The blood drained from Tristan's face. "Bryce, in the flesh, what's left of it?" Bryce's smile never reached his eyes. Surprised I survived the helicopter crash you arranged? I don't know what you're talking about, Tristan stammered, half rising from his chair. Bryce slid a folder across the table. Antonio Diaz's signed confession detailing how you paid him to sabotage my helicopter. The police have a copy. So does my attorney. And if anything happens to me, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle will run it as their cover story. Tristan sank back into his chair, his arrogance evaporating. What do you want? I want you to understand what's happening. Bryce pressed a button, and screens around the room illuminated with financial documents. Phoenix Ventures now controls 62% of Wexler Development's debt. We own the land surrounding your remaining projects. We've acquired your suppliers, your contractors, and your financing. You've been systematically destroying my company, Tristan whispered. I've been systematically destroying you, Bryce corrected. Your company is merely collateral damage. Is this about Vanessa? She chose me. After you try to have me killed, Bryce interrupted. But no, this isn't about Vanessa. She's irrelevant. The words struck deeper than Bryce expected. Vanessa had truly become irrelevant to him. A realization that confirmed his transformation was complete. Here's what happens next, Bryce continued, sliding another document across the table. You will sign Axiom Tower and all associated properties over to Phoenix Ventures for $1. That's a $400 million project, which you can't complete without my cooperation. Your alternative is bankruptcy and prison for attempted murder. Tristan's hands trembled as he processed his options. And if I sign, Phoenix absorbs Wexler Development. You retain a figurehead position with no actual authority. You will announce that your engagement to Vanessa Reynolds is over, and you will leave Lakeshire permanently within 30 days. My family has been here for generations. Your family is in Connecticut, where you'll be relocating. A modest position has been arranged with a property management firm. You'll earn enough to live, but never enough to rebuild. And if I refuse, Bryce leaned forward. Then I'll take everything anyway, but you'll do it from prison. Antonio Diaz is very eager to testify against the man who promised to protect him, but then abandoned him. Tristan stared at the document, defeat etched in every line of his face. You've thought of everything. I've had 5 years to plan this moment. Bryce placed a pen beside the contract. Your choice. As Tristan shakily signed each page, Bryce felt not the rush of victory he'd expected, but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was merely the first phase of justice. One question, Tristan said, signing the final page. How did you do it? Rebuild yourself after. You made a fundamental miscalculation, Bryce replied, taking the signed contract. You believe my value was in my face, my construction company, my relationship with Vanessa. You thought by taking those, you'd destroy me. He stood, towering over his defeated enemy. But you merely stripped away everything that wasn't essential. What remained was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. As Tristan was escorted from the building, Bryce turned to Miles. Initiate Phase 2. Chapter 8. The Dismantling. News of Tristan and Vanessa's broken engagement dominated Lakeshire's social circles for precisely 2 days before being overshadowed by the announcement that Phoenix Ventures had acquired Wexler Development. The business community reeled from the sudden consolidation of power. Tristan departed quietly for Connecticut, his reputation in tatters after leaked documents suggested financial improprieties in his management of Axiom Tower. The leak, carefully orchestrated by Bryce, ensured that even if Tristan ever attempted to return to Lakeshire, no one would do business with him. With Tristan eliminated, Bryce turned his attention to Douglas Reynolds. The shipping magnate had once dismissed Bryce as unworthy of his daughter. Now, he faced the systematic dismantling of his empire. Reynolds Shipping lost the Eastport contract, Miles reported during their morning briefing. Their stock dropped 17% overnight. Increase our position, Bryce instructed. I want controlling interest by month's end. The call from Douglas Reynolds came 3 days later, requesting an urgent meeting. Bryce agreed to see him at the Phoenix Foundation Charity Gala, a public venue where Reynolds would be at a disadvantage. You're destroying my company, Reynolds accused, cornering Bryce on the balcony overlooking the gala. Why am I? Bryce sipped his whiskey. Perhaps you're simply facing market forces beyond your control. This is personal. It's about Vanessa. Mr. Reynolds, your daughter made her choice 5 years ago. She's irrelevant to my current business decisions. Then why target my shipping lines? Why block our port access? Bryce turned to face him fully. 5 years ago, your daughter told me I was too disfigured to love. She said no one would want me. You supported her decision, called it sensible in the circumstances. Reynolds had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was unfortunate, but unfortunate. Bryce's voice remained controlled, but eyes formed around each word. While I was at my lowest point, your family revealed exactly who they were. Now that I'm at my highest, I'm returning the favor. What do you want? Money? An apology? I want you to experience exactly what I did. Watching helplessly as everything you've built is taken from you. Bryce smiled coldly. The difference is you have somewhere to fall. Your family money will cushion you. You'll regret this vindictiveness, Reynolds warned. Vanessa is devastated. She truly regrets what happened. She regrets backing the wrong horse, Bryce corrected. She chose Tristan thinking he was the path to greater wealth and status. Now she sees her mistake. He finished his drink. Give her a message from me, Mr. Reynolds. The next time she calls, I might actually answer, just to tell her that her father is about to lose control of Reynolds Shipping. The following week, Phoenix Ventures launched its most aggressive move yet, initiating a hostile takeover of Reynolds Shipping. The maneuver, combined with the strategic alliances Bryce had formed, left Douglas Reynolds no viable defense. Meanwhile, Vanessa grew increasingly desperate. Her calls to Bryce continued, now accompanied by handwritten letters and attempts to contact him through mutual acquaintances. When those failed, she resorted to appearing at Phoenix Foundation events, only to be politely but firmly turned away by security. Her final attempt came on the evening Phoenix Ventures announced its successful acquisition of Reynolds Shipping. Vanessa bypassed security by claiming a medical emergency, making it all the way to Bryce's private elevator before Miles intercepted her. He doesn't want to see you, Miles told her plainly. Please, she begged, her perfect composure cracking. 5 minutes. I need to explain. Explain what? Miles asked. How you abandoned him when he needed you most. Or how you're only interested now that he's powerful and wealthy. It's not like that. I made a terrible mistake. Tears streaked her makeup. I love him. No, Ms. Reynolds, you don't. You love what he represents. Redemption for your catastrophic miscalculation. Miles ushered her toward the exit. Mr. Harmon has moved on. I suggest you do the same. As security escorted Vanessa from the building, Bryce watched from his office window. The woman who had once been the center of his world now appeared small and insignificant. Are you sure about this next phase? Miles asked, joining him at the window. It crosses a line. They crossed the line first, Bryce replied. Is everything prepared? Miles nodded. The documents are ready. Once released, there's no going back. Bryce turned away from the window. Release them. The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle ran an explosive expose revealing that the Reynolds family fortune, supposedly built on shipping innovation, had actually originated from Prohibition-era bootlegging and subsequent money laundering operations. The documentation, meticulously researched and verified, destroyed generations of carefully constructed social standing overnight. Douglas Reynolds resigned from all public positions and boards. The family's charitable foundation collapsed as donors distanced themselves. Their social invitations dried up. The Reynolds name, once synonymous with old money respectability, became tainted beyond repair. Bryce had taken everything from them: their businesses, their reputation, their social standing, just as they had taken everything from him 5 years ago. Yet as he reviewed the morning headlines, Bryce felt only emptiness. The revenge he had methodically constructed had been executed flawlessly. Why then did victory taste so hollow? Chapter 9. Ashes of Empire. 1 year after destroying the Reynolds-Wexler alliance, Bryce Harmon stood atop the completed Axiom Tower, renamed Phoenix Tower, surveying the city that had once rejected him and now lay at his feet. His revenge had been complete and devastating. Tristan lived in obscurity in Connecticut. Douglas Reynolds had retreated to a family property in Europe. Vanessa had finally stopped calling 6 months ago, after Bryce's attorney delivered cease and desist papers. "Beautiful view," Miles commented, joining him on the helipad. "Worth the wait." Bryce didn't answer immediately. The satisfaction he'd expected to feel remained elusive. "It should be, but it isn't. They've lost everything that mattered to them," Bryce admitted. "Yet I don't feel finished." "Because revenge doesn't heal the original wound," came a voice from behind them. Vivian Mercer approached, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "It just creates new ones." "Philosophical today, Vivian?" Bryce asked dryly. "Practical. You've accomplished your goal. Destroyed your enemies. Now what?" The question had been haunting Bryce for months. His single-minded focus on revenge had left no room for considering what might come after. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Miles reminded him. "The acquisition of West Coast Technologies is on the agenda." As they descended to the executive floor, Bryce's assistant intercepted them with an urgent message. "Mr. Harmon, there's a woman in reception insisting on seeing you. She says her name is Vanessa Reynolds." Bryce and Miles exchanged glances. "Tell her I'm unavailable," Bryce instructed. "I did, sir. She says she has information about Antonio Diaz that you need to hear." The name caught Bryce's attention. Antonio Diaz had disappeared 3 months ago, shortly before he was scheduled to testify in a newly opened investigation into the helicopter crash. "Give me 5 minutes," Bryce told Miles, changing direction toward the reception area. Vanessa had aged visibly in the past year. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simpler attire, her perfect makeup by a more natural look. When she saw Bryce, she remained seated rather than rushing toward him as he had expected. "You mentioned Diaz," Bryce said without preamble. "What about him?" "He's dead," Vanessa stated flatly. "Apparent suicide in Mexico. The police found a note confessing that he lied about Tristan's involvement in your accident." Bryce's expression didn't change. "Why tell me this?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroy yourself." She met his gaze steadily. "The investigation will clear Tristan. The evidence you've built your revenge on will collapse. I thought you should hear it from me. Why would you warn me? I've systematically destroyed your family." "Because I loved you once," she answered simply. "Genuinely loved you, before fear and shallow values made me betray that love. Nothing I can say will ever make what I did right. But this information, consider it my final attempt at amends." For the first time in years, Bryce looked at Vanessa, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman who had abandoned him, but a human being carrying her own scars, albeit invisible ones. "What happens now?" he asked. "I'm leaving Lakeshire, starting over somewhere new." She stood, gathering her purse. "I hope you find whatever peace you're looking for, Bryce. Revenge hasn't given it to you. That much is clear from your eyes." After she left, Bryce returned to his office where Miles waited anxiously. "Diaz is dead," Bryce informed him. "Supposedly left a suicide note clearing Tristan." Miles cursed. "That complicates things. If the investigation clears Wexler." "It won't," Bryce interrupted, accessing his secure server. "Because Diaz didn't commit suicide. He was eliminated." "By whom?" "Tristan Wexler. He may be in Connecticut, but he still has resources." Bryce pulled up surveillance photos taken in Mexico. "These prove Wexler's connection to Diaz's death. I've had Tristan under surveillance since he left Lakeshire." Miles stared at him. "You anticipated this move?" "I anticipated everything." Bryce forwarded the evidence to his attorneys. "Tristan just upgraded his charges from attempted murder to actual murder. This ends today." Within hours, authorities in Connecticut arrested Tristan Wexler for orchestrating Antonio Diaz's murder. The evidence provided by Phoenix Ventures' private security firm was irrefutable. Tristan's desperate attempt to clear his name had instead sealed his fate. That evening, as Bryce sat alone in his penthouse, he finally opened the last voicemail Vanessa had left 6 months earlier. Her voice filled the room. "Bryce, I know you'll never listen to this. I know you'll never forgive me, nor should you. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you when you needed me most because I was shallow and afraid. I thought appearance was everything. Now I've lost everything that actually matters, and I understand what you felt. I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness. I just want you to know that I recognize the pain I caused, and I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. Goodbye, Bryce. Bryce deleted the message and walked to the window. Below, Lakeshire continued its evening rhythm, oblivious to the machinations that had reshaped its power structure. He had achieved everything he set out to do. His enemies were destroyed. His power was secure. Yet as he stood alone at the pinnacle of his revenge, Bryce Harmon realized that the scars that truly defined him weren't the visible ones on his face, but the invisible ones on his soul. Those would never heal as long as he remained imprisoned by the past. True freedom, he understood now, wouldn't come from destroying his enemies. It would come from finally walking away from the ruins of what they had taken from him and building something entirely new, something they had never touched. Bryce picked up his phone and dialed Miles. "Change of plans," he said when his friend answered. "Cancel the board meeting tomorrow. We're restructuring Phoenix Ventures, expanding, relocating. Lakeshire holds